Alright, so today I want to demo the different size tubs for my ball pythons that I have in my racks. You can see some of them behind me. I have a whole bunch of different sizes, all the way from the hatchling size tubs to the grow outs over here. You can see some grow out tubs behind me. And then I have the ARS 7030s. Those are the tubs that I use pretty much. You can house a ball python for its entire life in one of those 70 series ARS racks. I don't know what Bobby's doing here. And then I have some really big tubs, some ARS 8018 tubs, and I was fortunate to actually have those. I was going to actually breed Woma pythons, Australian Woma pythons, and I decided against it, and instead I filled them with ball pythons. And I was fortunate enough to have those big tubs because what I did is I bought some really big females that are close to 5,000 grams, and really I think those females wouldn't be comfortable in anything smaller than those big tubs. So what I want to do is I'm just going to pull some tubs from these racks, and what I want to do is I want to give you a measurement on the tubs because a lot of people have been asking what the dimensions are of the tubs, and I'll kind of give you an idea how big they are. And it's kind of hard to see on camera. You know, if you go home with your ruler, you could probably figure out kind of the size if I give you some dimensions. So let's check out some tubs. All right, so I'm going to start out with my hatchling rack here. This is an ARS 1039 hybrid. It has 39 tubs, and it's called a hybrid because it actually has some plastic in it. You see some plastic pieces like right here and the plastic on top, versus like this rack over here is a non-hybrid where it's just solid metal. This one is a lot heavier than the hybrid rack, which has a lot of plastic in it. And these tubs, I really like these for hatchlings. They are, I think, the perfect size for hatchlings. This is Yoda, my bamboo ball python, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this tub out and set this camera up on a tripod, and let's look at this tub a little more in detail. Alright, so this is my hatchling rack tub. You can see this guy right here. This is Yoda, and he is actually a brand new hatchling, hasn't even had his first meal yet. I fed him once and he didn't eat. I'm going to try to feed him one more meal again tomorrow. It's been about a week since I tried. And usually these hatchlings, they can be a little stubborn to start eating the first few times. And if they don't eat for a month and a half, I'm usually not worried. But if they don't eat for a couple months, then I'm considering assist feeding. But essentially this tub, what I really, kind of the setup that I use for all my tubs is I use this coconut husk substrate around the front, and I keep it off the back. And the reason I like that is because the snake can go right on the 90-degree hot spot in the back. And I would say probably 9 times out of the 10 when they want to go to the bathroom, they usually crawl up on the coconut husk, they go to the bathroom, and then they crawl back on the hot spot, which is pretty convenient. And then these actually have these little disposable deli cups. I think these are like an 8-ounce deli cup, which is really handy. And what I do is I save all the deli cups and wash them and reuse them. So I actually have a ruler here. We can take a measurement on this. I'm going to measure the inside of this. It is 19 3/4 inches by 8 inches. So it's a pretty big tub, I would say. You can tell that snake definitely has a lot of room to crawl around. And the depth on these is, let's see, it is almost 3.5 inches deep. And you know, ball pythons really don't need a lot of height. They need more kind of a flat open area versus any kind of a height. And the interesting about these tubs is pretty much with all the ARS tubs, a lot of people have asked me, well, you have a tub, where is the hide? And the interesting thing is if you have a gray tub like this, it's totally grayed out, and you close it, essentially what happens is the whole tub is completely dark and it has a little bit of air ventilation on the front, so a little bit of diffused light can come in. But essentially what's happening with these tubs is the whole tub acts as one large hide. So for example, if you had an aquarium that was this big and you put a little hide right over the ball python, essentially your enclosure is only as big around as the hide that the ball python is in. And when you use a whole tub like this, it takes their living space and it multiplies it times 5 or 6 or even more, depending on how big the tub is. And I really love these tubs. I used to have the ball pythons in aquariums, and they were always a challenge to get to eat. And when I put them in these tubs, they would instantly eat, especially, you know, if someone gave me a problem feeder, I put them in these racks, and usually within a couple days, they would start eating like crazy again. It's pretty amazing how effective these are to stimulate the appetite of snakes. All right, so when that ball python hatchlings outgrow the hatchling rack, what I do is I move them over to the grow out rack. And the problem is what I found is essentially, you know, I didn't really realize this at first. I bought the hatchling racks, and the hatchling racks, unless it's breeding season, they're completely empty most of the year. And then you move them over to here, and essentially this in a grow out rack is technically a temporary enclosure for the snakes until they reach adults, and then you move them up to something bigger over there. But if we take a look at these, this is actually an ARS 5040, and the reason they call it a 5040 is because it's a 50 series tub, and there's 40 per rack. And the thing I like about these is you can pull them out really far, and they're still really sturdy. So I can pull that tub way out, and it's really sturdy. It's not going to fall off. The snake can crawl all over it, and it kind of hangs on right at the edge, which is what I like. So I would say probably a snake this big is probably getting close to the max as far as what you'd want to have in a grow out rack, and then from here you'd want to move it over to something a little bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out, and let's get some measurements on this tub. So as you can tell from this tub, it's pretty much set up the same way. I have a clear area in the back, and I've actually seen some people where they'll take the coconut husk and they'll put it on the back. And the problem is it's not really the right temperature on top of the coconut husk. And if you crank up the temperature, say you want it 90 degrees, like on top of the coconut husk, you essentially have to crank it to like 95. But then the problem is if the snake goes back there and moves all the coconut husks, then it's on too hot of a hot spot. So this is kind of the idea. You know, I've actually never seen anyone have a bare spot back in the hot spot. It seems like I'm the only one that does it. And the thing that I like about it is if they actually don't come up here and make a mess, I can just move this snake over, and I take like a diluted F10 with water, a solution of that on a paper towel, and I just wipe it down right there, put them right back on, and it sterilizes the whole thing. They're not sitting on anything that's soiled or old or anything like that. And it's been working really well for me. So if we take a measurement on this one is 25 and a half on the inside by 11 and a half. And let's see if we can get a measurement on the height. It is almost 5.5 inches. So it's a pretty big enclosure for a snake like this. And you really have to think about it is this is essentially the whole hide for the snake. So this is really the living space, so you can kind of imagine if you had like a 6-foot long aquarium and you flip this upside down as the hide, this would be essentially the hide in the aquarium that the snake would spend most of its time in. That's kind of what you have to think about it is as far as this. And the other thing that I've also noticed, you can get these tubs, I've seen racks with tubs that aren't gray like this and they're clear. And I would say if you have a clear tub in a rack, you really need a hide. And then essentially what you're doing is you're taking the big living area and you're putting a hide over it, and the living area is as big as the snake. It's not really as comfortable, I would say, as having the gray tubs and a big living area like this. All right, so this rack over here is kind of a mix of a whole bunch of different stuff. The cool thing about ARS is you can buy one level at a time. You can stack them on different things. So this actually stacks on a boa tub, actually stacks on an ARS 8018, and you can kind of customize it however you want. And originally when I started out, I didn't really know what I wanted, so I got a whole bunch of different stuff kind of in this stack. This is like my very first. As a matter of fact, I just had a couple of these levels sitting right on the ground. That's how I started, and I didn't really have kind of added layer after layer in my very first rack over here. So if you take a look at this, this is actually a 70-30 where they'd have 30 tubs in a complete rack, but they also have a 70-10. And if you watch one of my earlier videos, a 70-10 is essentially just this stack right here. It's only this wide. You can stack 10 high, and it's essentially the same exact tubs as this. And if you look at this, this is essentially what you want for an adult ball python. So this one has laid eggs a couple times. This is a female, and this is perfect for a ball python for her entire life, pretty much, unless you get a really super big ball python. I actually have some really big ones. They fit in here, but it is a little bit tight. I would say if you're looking for something permanent, you could do one of these 70 series, like a 70-30, or I think they might have a 70-20, where they have 20 tubs in a rack, but they also have the 70-10, and this one is actually a normal. You can always tell kind of how seasoned ball python breeders are, and I'm still kind of only like 5 years into it, so I still have some normals. I just can't seem to get rid of them. And some people hang on to them, some people upgrade them. I'm thinking about actually taking my 70-10 and moving it in here and putting some of my older females in there and kind of maybe just using them as, I don't know, if I want to expand, I can just kind of hold them on hold just in case I have a bunch of snakes that decide not to feed one year. I can kind of cycle some of these snakes through. But this is, I would say, if you're looking for something that will, you know, it's perfect for pets, because I've actually seen the 70-10 series, and essentially all it is like this one level, and then it has the casters and the base unit, and that would be perfect for your pet snake for its entire life. As a matter of fact, if you bought one of these, I've actually seen where you can actually put a whole bunch of coconut husk in here, kind of pile it up over here. This guy's kind of freaking out. And then put your hatchling like back in the corner and kind of tucked in with all the substrate around it. And that way it kind of has a little hide in the back that's kind of carved out. And it can actually come out, and you could essentially raise up a hatchling all the way to adult in here. But, you know, most people, what they prefer is they prefer to go from the small hatchling rack to the grow out rack and over to this rack. So I'm going to pull this out and we'll get some dimensions on this tub. All right, so I got my handy ruler here. This one is actually 31.5 inches. That is pretty big, by just under 16 inches. That's a really big tub, and it's really big for this snake. This snake could actually, it's probably in the transition where you could probably almost, I've seen people squeeze these in the grow out tubs, but I think it's definitely too big for the grow out tub, and it's definitely time to move a snake like this into a 70 series tub. This is perfect for this snake. All right, so I really wanted to show you this. This is my biggest ball python in the whole thing. This girl is probably close to 5,000 grams, and you see she does this pretty tight fit. I think she could probably be okay in here. She could, you know, kind of tuck up there in the back. But what I really prefer for this, especially since I have bigger tubs, I want to move this girl up to an ARS 8018 tub. It's an 80 series tub, and let me show you that tub. All right, so the bottom level of this rack, this is an ARS 8018, and here is that same snake that I had in the 70 series tub, and you see how well it fits in an ARS 8018 tub. That is a really the perfect size for this ball python. And the funny thing about this is these racks, I think, you know, with the gray tubs, they're really only designed for ball pythons because they're completely enclosed, they're gray, and ball pythons don't move. They're really happy in a tub like this. If you put like a king snake, or even, I think even a corn snake probably wouldn't be happy in a tub like this without a window to look out, because they're a little bit more active than a ball python that just really likes to hang out in the dark most of the time. It doesn't really move. These ball pythons are, you know, they really, ever since I put them in these tubs, their appetites just go through the roof and they eat like crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this tub out and let's take a measurement on this tub. So I have to say, I am not affiliated with ARS. I don't get a kickback or commission on any of these racks or tubs, but I just thought it was interesting. This is what I went from the beginning, and these, let me tell you, these racks are going to last me for the rest of my life. They are super heavy duty. So if you notice on this tub, it's kind of interesting. It actually had a window on this side, which I actually covered with duct tape, and I spun it around and I put it on the back of the tub. So the back is over there and the back of the rack. The front is over here. It looks really professional to have this side on the front, and I want it completely closed. This was actually a tub designed for snakes bigger than ball pythons, other than ball pythons. that actually like to look out the window, and ball pythons really need a secure environment where it's completely dark. So let's get a measurement on this one. This is 31 inches. And this way, 24 inches, 31 by 24. That is a big tub. And it is about 6.5 inches deep. So that's pretty interesting. And one thing I didn't like about these tubs when I got them is they didn't come with built-in drink holders, which is kind of a bummer, but I started using these non-skid dog bowls. And they work just fine. I just pull the bowl out and spray it down with F10, let it soak for a little bit, wipe it down and rinse it, and it's good to go. It saves me on cups, but it's a little bit more labor, I'd say, to clean it versus just dumping a cup and replacing it. But since I only have 8 tubs, it's really not that much work. Alright, since I'm giving you a demo of all my racks, I thought I'd point out my boa tubs, which I don't keep ball pythons in, but I do have some other snakes. Actually, one boa tub's empty. I have my corn snake down on the bottom over here, and I have my super dwarf reticulated python in this one. The funny thing about this boa tub over here is they actually no longer manufacture this tub anymore. It's a little bit wider, fits on this stack with the 70-30s and the 80-18s, and then they changed the tub to fit over here in the 50-40 rack. So I really can't stack that tub over onto these tubs. It's kind of one or the other. That's why it's kind of a mismatch. I kind of wish I had more room and I could have got the whole rack of all the boa tubs. But if you look down here, this is kind of how I have my corn snake set up. Completely different. You can see I left the window on this one because the corn snakes kind of like to peek out a little bit. And let's see if we can find the corn snake. He is down here somewhere. I'm sure he's hiding under here. And he's been doing really good. I've been giving him some rats. He's been eating really well. You can see he's kind of getting beefy. And these corn snakes, it seems like they'll just keep eating and eating and eating. I just have to limit myself. I actually used to have a king snake, and that thing would eat so much. It got obese because I was, you know, when I first started out, I was feeding them all my leftover mice before I started freezing them. And these guys, it seems like their appetite is so crazy all the time that you really just kind of have to limit feed them. And you can tell he might take a bite out of me because he's really, you know, in feeding mode right now, not really in handling mode. Oh, let's see. Yeah, he's going after me. I don't want him to bite me. Whoa. Yeah, maybe I won't pick him up. He is definitely in feeding mode. And you can see the base of his tail over here. I think that is the last 2 decent sized rats I gave him. This guy actually pretty decent sized rats, but you know, normally once you get him up, he is completely friendly, no problem at all. He's just really in a crazed feeding mode. Sometimes my reticulated pythons get in that crazed feeding mode and they just start striking everything like crazy. Of course, if this guy bit me, it probably wouldn't hurt that much because he's got a pretty small mouth, but he is a really cool snake. So when you're trying to figure out when to move your snake from a small tub to the next size tub, pretty much my rule of thumb is if the snake coils up kind of in a coil over the hot spot in the resting position, if it almost touches the sides of the tub, I would say it's time to move that snake to the next size tub. That's pretty much my rule of thumb, and I'm always constantly moving, you know, from snakes from one size to the next, and sometimes I run out of one size and then I either have to sell them or figure out and buy more racks or something like that. It's kind of a juggle between rotating the snakes between the tubs as they grow. Some grow a lot faster than others. Some will actually stay pretty small for quite a long time. I have some that are mousers that I don't know if they'll ever get out of this grow out rack up into a 70 series tubs, but I'd say most are on a pretty good pace to keep outgrowing their tubs as you go. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.